All right, welcome. This is going to be a webinar on creating food service plans with MEP connection points using KitchDesigner, and we're going to do it in Revit. So to get started, this is a completed equipment plan. We've already tagged everything, numbered everything. We have our plan, we have our equipment schedule, and we're ready to start the MEP process. So this workflow is just going to be creating connection points. But so let's get started. The first tool that we're going to use is create place MEP views. And what we're going to do is we're going to create our electrical plan and our plumbing plan. We already have an electrical plan and a plumbing plan in our Revit file, but these came with our template, and they haven't actually been cropped to actually fit our design. And so we want our electrical plan and plumbing plan to look identical to our equipment plan. And to do that, we can use this Create Place MEP Views tool. And what this tool does is it takes your equipment plans and it'll create associated electrical plans, plumbing plans, or special conditions and mechanical. And to set this up, all you need to do is go into your settings, and on the view tabs, you just want to set your view templates. This is how that tool works. It's going to create these new views using these view templates. So as you saw, I already had these placeholder electrical plan and plumbing plan in this project, and we really want to replace those. So this tool will replace views if they do not have any dimensions or any text or any annotations in them. And that's what this is showing you right here. So when we go here, we want to select our equipment plan that we want to create the MEP views for, and then we're going to select the MEP views that we want to create. And when we press create, because these two already exist, you're going to get a message saying these already exist. Would you like to replace them? Because they don't have any dimensions, text, or annotations, it's going to give you the option to replace them. If these views did have some text or annotations, or dimensions in them, this Create Place MEP Views tool, it'll show you that. And then when you try to create them, it'll give you an error message and say, hey, these views have some stuff in them, dimensions, annotations, or tags. We're not going to be responsible for replacing them. So you'd have to delete out that stuff or just delete those views and then use this. So in this instance, we'll just delete the view I modified, come back to here, and press create to create our electrical and plumbing plan. And we'll replace the plumbing plan we already had. And so now we can close. And when we look at our electrical plan, you can see it'll look identical to the same cropping of our equipment plan. And same thing with plumbing. So now that we have our electrical plan, we're ready to begin adding our MEP connection points or electrical connection points. So first, make sure. I'm just going to run the add electrical connection tool, and we have to set it up first. So in settings, I was going to do this after I ran it, but I haven't set it up yet. There are these tabs in here for each electrical, plumbing, mechanical. And the button that we're going to start with is this load button. And here we can load some default connection point rules. And this is a great way to get started. It loads in these connection points, which are generic annotations in Revit. So it's loading in this junction box and this single receptacle. And it also loads in some rules for us to place these connection points. We'll manually create some of these in just a second, but I just want to show you what happens when you run the default rules first. So let's save this, and now let's run our add electrical connection tool. So we just placed 74 connection points, and there's only two different generic annotations that we're using with these two rules. One places junction boxes, and one places these receptacle symbols. And so as you can look around, you'll see this junction box, it was placed over top of the electrical connector in this ice machine. This one, same thing, placed over the connector in this food processor. But as you come around, you'll notice that some of the equipment doesn't have connectors, such as this condensate hood. It doesn't have any electrical connectors, but it's still got a connection point. And the location of this is just in the center of this family. This one here was for this dish machine, and that's placing it over top of this electrical connector. So these connection points are set up to work two different ways. When there are connectors in the families, it's placing these connectors on top of those electrical connector inside the family. And when the family does not have any electrical connectors, it's just using a default location that we set in the settings. So you can see these were probably all default locations. I don't think these had connectors in them. They're all in the center of the families. Same thing here. These are junction boxes for a heat trace and an evaporator. This is for the walk-in center of the family. And so as we go around, you can see when there are families that have connectors, we're putting our connection points over top of them. And when there are families that do not have connectors, we're just using our default locations. So let's go back into settings to show you how this was set up. So these default rules, you can see here, I've basically duplicated each symbol. So we're placing direct symbols on families with connectors with this first rule. And then the second rule is placing the same direct symbol, but these are for families that do not have connectors. And so the actual conditions when to place the rule are the same for both. We're looking for when these families have volts greater than 0. These are using the FCSI shared parameters, the industry shared parameters. And then also we're looking at the electric connection type parameter, and we're using does not contain. You can use all of these different operators. So we're saying when it does not contain the word cord and electrical connection type, place this junction box connection point. And so the other parameters you can use are most of all, all of the FCSI shared parameters for electrical. And then we also give mark, type mark, item number, and even description that you could use to say if it contained or did not contain a certain word. So over here on the right side, all this stuff is for rough-ins. We're not placing rough-ins, so we don't need to set any of these rough-in symbols. But over here is where we set our connection point symbols. So here is where you'd actually set the symbol that you wanted to place. So we're placing our junction box. And then here, because this is with connectors, we're setting the connector system type to a certain type, and we're looking for this in the family. And so I'll open up a family and show you how this kind of correlates. But there's 3 different things you can use to set these. Connector system type, which has these default settings, which are Revit based. Connector description, which is a field that you can fill in inside of a family or inside of a connector family. And then the last one is electrical connectors. And this is just used to say when a family does not have connectors. So you'll see that in these rules where we say without connectors. So here, all of this is identical to up here. We're still placing the same symbol when the same parameters are true, but this is only placing them when a family does not have any connectors. So we do this just to kind of cover both bases. If you have a project where some families have connectors and some families do not have connectors, this is the best way to set it up. You kind of handle 2 situations separately. If you have a project where you don't have any connectors in it at all, I'm going to show you a different way to set it up here in just a second. But this, most of the families being created today by the content creators, they all have their connectors in them, and that information is really valuable. So as you can see, if we edit a family, there's Alto Sham. These guys are the actual connectors that I speak of where we're placing the connection points. So these get put into families by content creators, and this information unfortunately can't be used by MEP engineers yet, but we can now use it in Foodservice to actually show where the electric connects to this piece of equipment or where the cord comes out of this piece of equipment. So if you click on these connector families, and just if I deleted this family, well, let me show you first and then I'll add a new one. And you can see over here, this first parameter for this connector is system type. And so this is that same list I was showing you in the settings. These are all the different system types that Revit has. You can't add these or edit them. These are just the default types that we get to work with. And so we had it set up as any system types, any type of electrical connector. But for the most part, usually things are power balanced is what they should be. And then this connector description is that other parameter that we can look for. And here you could type in you can type in whatever you want. So it's a field that you can fill in if you would like, and then you can look for that to place connection points based on if this is filled in. So if you wanted to add connectors to some of your families, it's not a hard thing to do. Just on this Create tab over here, there's 5 different types. We're mainly only looking at these 3 types. But if you click electrical connector, you usually need to place it on some type of geometry in the family, which is why you'll see these little extrusions where they place connectors. And then you just click the extrusion and it'll center it on top of it. And then you can come click it and set your system type or connector description, or if you want to, you can set your voltage and other things. You can also link these to the parameters inside the family so that they stay in sync. So when I was a consultant, or designer and consultant, I used to delete out these connectors. They didn't seem helpful and they couldn't be used by engineers, and it just kind of seemed like they were something to be distracted. But now, obviously, I've changed that opinion. It's great information when you can use it, and with these tools, we can now place these connection points exactly where the electric connects to each piece of equipment. So if you have a project and you don't have any connectors in it, you can make these rules simpler. So instead of having 2 rules for each, we could just delete out our rules with connectors. And then this would just be a standard direct. This would just be a standard cord and plug. Also on the cord and plug rule, save this. On the cord and plug rule, it's just the opposite of direct. So this says electric connection type does not contain cord, and cord and plug says electric connection type does contain cord. So if we delete out the connector portion, and then we come over here and we delete out the portion that says they do not have any connectors. Now when we run this, it's just going to place these connection points in the default location that we select. And to show you that location, it's this button on the far right here, show placement options. So when you click this, all of these will change, and we have these little buttons here where we can actually set our placement location. So when you open this up, you can see this is kind of a plan view of just a generic piece of equipment. And these 6 checkboxes are 6 different locations where you can place these connection points. So by default, I usually have electrical in just the center of the family, or maybe the center back. But you can kind of select those locations where you want to place them. And because there are no connectors, we just need to use a default location. So I do think that when you have connectors, you should use that information. But if you don't, then you can just set your default location. So if we save this, I'm going to remove the annotations I just placed. And let's run it again. So it's still going to pick up every single family. It's not going to miss any because they still have the same voltage greater than 0 or electric connection type contains or does not contain the word cord. But here, as you can see with this ice machine, it's now just placing this connection point in the center of the family instead of using this electrical connector location. So there's just 2 ways to run it. The default way is set up where, some projects are where you have a mix of equipment with connectors and without connectors, which we see as typical. Most of the stuff getting inserted from KCL is, has these connectors in it, and there's really no reason not to use that information if you have it. And so when we run this, it's just going to be the center of each family, as you can kind of see here. So the other thing that's happening when we're placing these add electrical connectors, for one, it's recording every connector that's been placed, so it's not going to place duplicates. You'll notice you could run it again if I just deleted this one connector and ran it again, it would realize I just deleted that one connector, and it would just place that one connector back. So you can add equipment, you can run it, you can add more equipment, you can delete equipment, and continue running the tool, and it's only going to pick up the connectors that are 1 connector for each piece of equipment. And the other thing it's doing is in my generic annotations that these get loaded in by default if you use that load default button in settings. But if you have your own generic annotations, we recommend adding the parameter that you're using for your item number. So the default ones that we have, we've added all three: item number, mark, and type mark. And since this project is set up to use the mark parameter, this oven's mark, number 64, it's getting copied over to this connection point. So it's just a really good way to understand what connector is for what piece of equipment, because otherwise, for something like this, it'd be hard to understand which one was for the hood or which one was for the dishwasher. But because we have these item numbers, it's easy to kind of match them up. So that is how we place all of our electrical connections. Next, we're going to go over tagging them. And so the way the tag electrical connection tool works, it's tagging specialty equipment families that contain connection points. So the first thing you would need to do is go into settings and go to annotation tags, and you would need to set these two settings. This right here, stands for specialty equipment electrical connection tag. That's the one that's getting placed with tag electrical connections. And then this specialty equipment plumbing connection tag is getting placed with tag plumbing connections. So we've set those just to two tag families. And when we click tag electrical connection, it's going to use this tag toggle switch to tag either the front of the family or the back of the family. We'll just leave it on tag front. And so really all this is doing, it's just tagging all of the families that have electrical connections and not tagging any families that do not have electrical connections. So as you come through, you'll see everything that has a connection point gets a tag. Things like the sink that do not will not get a tag. And so this is really a completed electrical connection point plan. Nothing else to do here besides put it on a sheet and kind of finish it up. So now let's move over to plumbing. So plumbing obviously is a little bit more complex. Electrical, you pretty much only have a couple different symbols you could use, maybe 3 or 4, but with plumbing, we start to get up to 5, 6. And so because we don't really want stuff overlapping, plumbing gets set up a little bit differently, or the placement options get set up a bit differently. So again, we're going to load in our default rules. And just like with the electrical, these default rules basically have everything duplicated. So we have a hot water with connectors and a hot water without, cold water with without, direct waste, indirect waste, and gas. And as far as the conditions to place these, they're quite simple. We're just saying whether when hot water size is greater than 0, place a hot water connection point. Same thing for this one without connectors. Cold water is cold water size greater than 0. Direct waste is direct waste size greater than 0. Indirect waste is indirect waste size greater than 0. And gas is gas size greater than 0. So on the connection point side, we've set all of our connection points based on what we're trying to place here. But down here in these conditions, this is where it gets a little bit more complex than electrical, because electrical, most all of the connectors are just using the same classification, or they're really not, there's not a bunch of different classifications that we need to use. But for plumbing, we really do need to specify these classifications if we are using connectors. And they are pretty accurate. We have one for hot water, we have one for cold water, we have one for sanitary. The FCSI standards for creating content specify that gas should use the other pipe category for connectors. And then I believe that hydronic supply and hydronic return are for chilled water return and supply. So we have these accurate system classifications. So we would want to set those up because most of the content, or good majority of the content that's created with connectors, has the correct system classification already set in it. I didn't have to go through all these families. I just inserted them from KCL, and 90% plus were all ready to go. The one issue I see mostly is with gas. Sometimes gas isn't set correctly, and it's set to hydronic supply or something like that. So I'll show you a fix for that. So with the replacement, you can see it's much more diverse. For hot water, we're using this location right here. And if you think about a faucet, cold water is always on the right, hot water is always on the left. So that's kind of what we're expecting here for these locations for hot water. For cold water, as you would expect, it's over here to the right. For direct waste, back in the center middle. For indirect waste, we're just putting it in the center of the family. Indirect waste works really well when you have connectors because you can put a waste connector on the bottom of your sink bowls where they drain out, and it'll place multiple. You put a 3-compartment sink, you'll see that, and some other things. So indirect waste is one where I actually really recommend just adding the connectors just because you can get a much better product out of it instead of just placing one indirect waste symbol in the center of the family. And finally, gas, which we have set up to be the back left corner. And back left corner or back right corner, I feel like are the natural locations for it, depending on the manufacturer. So let's show you how this works. So we're going to come back to our plumbing plan and press the Add Plumbing Connection tool. So you can see we just placed 84 connection points. So let's go and check out these guys. So here's this is a water filter, a pure water filter. It has 2 cold water connections on it. So we got these 2 cold water symbols that were placed. Here we have a hand sink. We're getting our hot water to the left, cold water. These are probably placed on top of the, no, it doesn't look like this actually has any connectors in it. So this is just using those default locations. And the same thing with this direct waste. Here with these ice machines, or this ice machine, this is the ice bin. You can see it has a sanitary right there in the center. That's this one. And then here's that ice machine, again, has a sanitary connector right here in the back left corner. So getting good locations there. Same thing with the cold water. That was from the ice machine. Looks like that cold water may not have actually been getting placed on top of that connector. We're probably using our default rule. And so here, another filter. Our connector here is off to the side. I'm not sure why about that one. And here we have a sink. You know, we've added 2 sanitary connectors on top of the sink bowl, so you're getting your indirect waste right where they need to be. And this faucet, I think this faucet had some connectors. Nope, faucet still doesn't have connectors. So then again, default locations for these hot and cold. So we can go around, you can see it does a really great job. This is because the indirect waste are getting placed because of these sanitary connectors. Looks like the faucets are just using the default rules for when there are no connectors. And for the most part, everything is in pretty great places. Not much we need to touch. It's great to see the indirect waste coming out where they actually come out. It'd be really helpful when we place floor sinks to know where the drains are leaving these pieces of equipment. Evaporators, another hand sink. Here's some cook lines. Here's these gas locations. So this used the connector here. This looks like this used the connector for the location. Same thing with this stock pot. Same thing with this combi oven. So this cold water looks like this is just using the default location. And these are the indirect waste on our drop-ins. So those are our plumbing connectors. This is what we get placed when you use these default rules. And again, all these symbols, all these generic annotation symbols are coming in when you load those default rules. It's actually loading those symbols into your project. And again, they have these marks. So we're moving from equipment to connector. So tagging this, same thing, just like tagging electrical. It's only going to tag the families that have a plumbing connector in them. So we get this really great tag scheme here where we're only showing the things that need to be connected to some type of plumbing connection. And you can, obviously come in here and fine tune these tags. Something we did add not too long ago was the ability to create free end tags when tags are created instead of creating fixed tags. So when the tags are actually placed, they're pretty easy to modify if you need to. So that would be the default setup for plumbing connectors. I went over the issue that could happen with gas, with some content being created with the wrong gas connectors. So let me just show you a fix for that. It really comes back to just using the rules without connectors at all. But if you're worried that some of your families may have the wrong gas connectors or wrong system type for their gas connectors, it may not be set to other pipe, maybe set to something else, then you could Oops. That. You could create a new rule. We'll just call it gas. And here are all the parameters we're able to use. So we'll set gas size is greater than 0, and then we'll set our gas symbol. And we won't set any connector system classification. And so this is basically saying we're losing the ability to place gas connectors over top of these connectors in these families. But if you're worried about the quality of the content and maybe it not having it set up as other type, then you can do this. And here we can just place a generic location for the gas. So here we'll just say back left again. And so if we save this, bleed out the stuff that we did before. And now if I ran the plumbing connection, it's going to be the same thing for all the water and the indirect waste and the waste, but now you'll see we're just getting our gas placed at the back left corner. And this is basically agnostic to whether these have connectors or not. These did, obviously, we saw that, but if they did or they didn't, and they had maybe the wrong type, at least this way you have a standard gas location that you don't have to worry about. So this came up recently just because I've noticed there are a good bit of families that most of the connectors are great, but sometimes gas connectors end up in hydronic supply, which is the default system type. And I think that's probably because some content creators don't understand to set it to other pipe, unfortunately. So those are the two ways you can set up these rules to place these connectors, whether there are connectors or not, or whether you just want to ignore the connectors altogether. And then obviously tagging them is quite simple once you have your connectors placed. So next, this is completed. We're done here. Besides organizing some tags and just making this look a little better, we're ready to put this on a sheet and keep moving. But next, we're going to go over MEP devices. And so MEP devices are these buttons right here. I have some set up in here for electrical, fire pools, convenience outlets, and some beverage conduits. And then I also have some set up for plumbing, floor sinks, area floor drains, open site drains, and gas manifolds. So to place these, let me show you how they're set up first. So in settings, the tab MEP devices, here's where you can set up these 15 different devices that we have in here. And to set these up, all you do is click the plus button. It'll show you all of the eligible families in your project. These have to be electrical fixture families or one of the other electrical categories. And we're just going to select this. This is convenience outlet. So we'll select our family, and then that will make that button active. So if this is not set, then you won't see convenience outlet here. It just won't make that button active. But once you set these, then these buttons become active. So I only have a few set up just because for this demo, but you could set up a good bit more. Switches, disconnects. For beverage conduits, we have 3 different types. They could be floor, wall, or ceiling. For plumbing, funnel floor drains, gas manifolds, 3 different types. And then mechanical, which we're going to go over at a later webinar, you could set up all these connectors or all these MEP devices as well. So once you have these buttons set up, we'll go back to electrical. You can just click the button and it will load the family, put it on the end of your mouse, and you can use spacebar to rotate it, and you can just go ahead and just place this family where you would like to place it. Convenience outlet, same thing. We could quickly go around and place some convenience outlets over our work tables and so forth. But MEP devices are really just a really simple way to place preset families. Go to plumbing plan, same thing. We have floor sinks in here. You can quickly go around and just place all of your floor sinks, floor drains, whatever device you're using. So that's how you use MEP devices. And at this point, we are ready to take these completed MEP plans and put them on some sheets. So the next tool we're going to go over is Sheet Creator. So let's come down to our equipment plan sheet. So Sheet Creator is a tool that's going to allow us to quickly create sheets with all of these views, or all the views that we set in locations that we set. So for equipment plans, you don't really use a sheet creator because this plan kind of gets built manually at the beginning of a project. You place your equipment plan and place your schedule. But after this, when you want to create your electrical and plumbing plan, you usually want to mimic this look. You're going to have the same plan in the same location, and then you're going to have, you know, a different set of notes, maybe some electrical details, electrical legends, and electrical schedule. So let's go to the sheet creator tool. And in here, you can have 3 different sheet sizes. We're working on getting the what I would like to call the ISO sizes and the ANSI sizes added to this really soon here, probably in the next update. And then down here, so we have 3 sheet sizes right now, and then down here we have 8 different sheet types. And so, as I mentioned, you don't have to use all of these by any means. We kind of put them in here so that you could create 8 different templates. But as you'll see, I have electrical and plumbing already set up in here. And so what this is saying is whenever we create a new electrical sheet, we're going to want it to have these notes in this location, this detail in this location, disclaimer, legend, schedule. And these locations are all coming from the bottom left corner. So it's an XY, so it's saying 5, this first one's saying 5 inches to the right, and then 31.5 inches up to the top, which is kind of right there. And so to create these, the best way to do it, really the only way to do it, is to clone an existing sheet. We used to have an option to kind of just add the views you wanted, but it's much easier to just create a sheet in actual, using Revit, and just put the stuff that you would like on it. So for electrical, we'd add our electrical notes, we put a legend on there, I would have a disclaimer, and maybe a cancel detail or disclosure detail. And so once you had this kind of template set up, you don't need to worry about the floor plans, just because they change names so often. They're not really something that we place in Sheet Creator. We're going to end up using create place MEP views to place the floor plan. So you really just want to do all of the other views, which is everything besides floor plans. We could even do our electrical schedules. If Revit wants to cooperate. So I'm just gonna once you had this kind of template made up in Revit, this is an unnamed sheet that we just created, and click add. And what it's going to do is add all the views that you had on this sheet into your template with all of their locations. And so that next time we create an electrical plan, it would look exactly like this. And so this is something that you don't have to do all the time. You could probably do this just once and share it with the rest of the company. Maybe the locations may need to shift a little bit. We always have different size projects we're working on, and some of them very oddly shaped, and we have to get creative how we place stuff on sheets. But at the very least, you'll make sure you get all the stuff that you need on your sheet, and that way you can just kind of shift stuff around if you have to. So I have already created a sheet template, and I just loaded it back in. So once you create your sheet templates, you can use these export and import buttons just to save this. And it just saves it to, like what you saw, saves it to a little JSON file. And then you can share that with somebody, and you can always load it back in. And so this is something that you can do if you need to, but at the same time, when you press save in Revit, it saves all these sheet templates to your Revit file. So if you're doing this in your template, you just need to save your template after you do it. And then anybody who opens the template file, regardless of where they're at, will already have all this stuff set in here. And that's the same thing for all of our settings. When you save Revit, all of our settings basically get burned into the Revit file so that they stick with it, regardless if somebody else doesn't have those things. So Once we create our sheet templates, I'm just going to do electrical and plumbing for this. We can go next. And here's where we're actually going to create the sheets that we want. So in this right side, you're going to see all of the sheets in my current project, which is just that one equipment plan and just this one electrical I just created. Top left corner, this is to set a prefix and a suffix for our sheet names that are going to get created. And you can use, food service equipment as your prefix. And then here, you can use food service. And it won't duplicate these two words, so you won't get food service equipment plan. We set up something just for that specific reason. But next, in this bottom section, we're going to select the sheets that we want to create. So here we want to create one electrical plan, and we want to create one plumbing plan. And here's our default sheet numbers. This is something that's set in settings, but as you'll see, it's really just the first number in the series. So if I create two electrical plans, the first one will be numbered QF130, and then the second one will be numbered QF131. So you want to set up the number of sheets you want, make sure your names are all set up right. This again comes out of settings, so it's usually just a one-time thing, and your sheet numbers. And then you can use this plus symbol to add your sheets to your preview. So if I press it, you'll see we're going to show our proposed sheets in this teal color. And if I pressed it again, just so you would see, it's finding that next available number. So because 141 was taken, it's saying our second plumbing plan will be 142. So down here, it's proposed, this is showing what's going to be created when you press create. And as we saw, these are going to be created based on those templates we just created. So let's go ahead and press it. And once we finish this, taking a little bit longer than I would expected, but this will give us everything but our floor plans. So to finish this all up, we're going to go back to our create place MEP views tool, and we're just going to place our floor plans on our sheet. And so let's get rid of our fake sheet. So here's the electrical plan that we created. And this is how I had the template set up when I loaded in. And here's the second one. And as you can see, it's going to look identical. One thing that the sheet creator does is, these drafting views, they can't be placed on more than one sheet. So what it does automatically is if you're putting drafting views, it's automatically just going to copy them and add this copy. So if you wanted 5 electrical sheets with the same drafting view, it's just automatically going to create a copy of that drafting view. So it can be placed on more than one sheet. That's just a Revit quirk. And so let's see our plumbing plans. Similar, we put some details, notes, legends, schedule, disclaimer, and this one obviously look identical. The last thing with Sheet Creator is these titles. Sheet Creator doesn't have the ability to, or the Revit API doesn't have the ability to change the, this is called the viewport type. But if you don't want to show titles, you can select a view and you can click this edit type, and then there's this show title parameter right here. And so in my template, I have 2 different types set up, one for plans and details when you want to show the title, and then one for notes, legends, and schedules when you don't want to show the title. So if you do have to manually, if you want to get rid of the titles, you're going to have to manually change that sheet type. Like this. All right, so now let's add our floor plans onto our sheets. So I'm going to get rid of these 2 extra ones. Let's go to our electrical, see this live. So this create place MEP views tool, first we just use the create part, which is just this top section. And now we're going to use the place part, which is this bottom section. So what this tool does is it places these MEP views onto our sheets, these sheet numbers, and the location that it's going to place it is the same location as the equipment plan. So if your equipment plan is in the top right corner, it'll place these two views in the identical location on its respective sheet. So these color blocks you're seeing here, these are used to link these two together. So I can right click this and change these color blocks, but they're automatically assigned when you use the sheet creator tool or the create place MEP view tool as you saw. So before I do this, I just want to show you what you might expect to see. If I duplicated this. So if I just created some other equipment plans, you'd see these different colors come up. And so if I created some views for those, you'd see that these colors get assigned based on that. And so something that you might encounter, if these names don't match up kind of identically, you know, if these had odd names to them, such as like level 1 frost hood, even though this may go with that same equipment plan, when you come back to here, you'd see it didn't have a color. And so that's just because we're unable to automatically kind of match up what equipment plan that electrical plan went with. And so you can automatically assign that just by right clicking and then selecting which one. So we don't really care about all these other ones I created. We just want to place these two. So let's select these two. And these two numbers are correct. So when we go ahead, actually, before I do this, I'm going to go back to electrical sheet. You can see this. And so once again, we're just going to select these two and press place, and it'll place these two on these sheets. And there we go. So there's our electrical sheet, and here's our plumbing sheet. And as you can see, they have this nice flipbook effect with our equipment plan. All of our floor plans are identically in the same location, same size, same crop box, just to give this really nice, consistent set of plans. So that is it, guys. That's how you create a set of connection plans, MEP connection plans, using KitchDesigner and Revit.